This is going to be take two of a video that I erased. Only a few people saw it, so I don't know if it matters, but I've had time to contemplate the idea and why it's imperative that we understand these things. I'm speaking specifically about the fact that when the Antichrist comes, he is going to have a very strong appeal to those of the legalistic mind. The reason why this is dangerous, and there's quite a few scriptures that back this up, just a short list here real quick, go over Romans 7, 4 through 6, talking about how the way of the Spirit is essentially how we should live, not the written code. Romans 8, 1 through 10, very good verses on basically the exact same subject. Galatians 5, 1 through 15 is Paul dealing with an indictment that he was somehow being lawless because he didn't go off and circumcise folks. And then, of course, Galatians 5, 16 through 18 answering, saying that we live in the Spirit, not in the flesh. In other words, rules, regulations, things that we are to ponder our fleshly mind upon are not only subpar, but are almost, if not worthless, to the spiritual status, growth, and effectiveness of a believer in this life. When we didn't have the Spirit before Christ, the law was given as a bulwark for us to understand just how badly we needed Him. It was a defense measure against the ultimate expression of our sinful behavior, and it was a way to signify to others around the nation of Israel, not just the people specifically, although the people were included, where God was and where true holiness and true separation from evil worldly behaviors actually lay at that time. Why is this so dangerous for believers? Well, the gist of all these verses that I just listed off, and there's quite a few more, by the way. It's not just this series of verses. There's a lot, if we're being honest. Our contemplation of being able to follow rules and our ability to actually see the full fruition of our behavior from our mind outwardly is very limited. What that means is, well, for example, when Christ came, he made quite clear that things like adultery, murder, all types of immoralities regarding interpersonal relationships, sexually speaking, financial crimes, theft, covetousness, all of these things all start in the mind. And then they work their way out into action or word. Very much signifying the very pointed statement that Christ made, that things that go into a man's body are not what make him unholy, but what comes out of it. So we have this duality, if you will. Our flesh is very tended towards sin. We very much are likely to stumble and likely to be in a position where we're going to sin. However, we also have the ability, because of our awareness through the Spirit and His enlightening and enhancement of our conscience, to be able to see these things coming if we are paying attention. This is where walking in the Spirit is so imperative. It is a step-by-step acknowledgement of God's interjection in our life. Interjection, basically His constant input, His constant witness to the fact that, A, He's God and He knows everything. He knows what's best for us. He's the one laying out these good works we're supposed to do as we take steps. But we're also in a position where not only should we not be having to think defensively, because we already have the Spirit, we have the entirety of the Bible to learn so as to be able to grow and understand the absolute depth of the evil that comes from within us and what God had to go through in the person of Christ to save us from. That should make us all want to cry, let's be honest. But it puts us in a position now that we have the power of the Spirit and His empowerment through the various gifts that are given to us to empower our ministries. Specifically, that's the end goal anyway, is to learn the Bible, grow in it, and then have a ministry that's assigned by Him specifically for the use of other believers in our surrounding area, or whatever kind of outreach He gives us. For example, some of you may be across the world and I don't know it. So that goes a long way to say that now that we have the power to outreach, we have gone so far past just having a need to defend our companions, local neighbors, family members against our potential acts just by a set of lists and rules. But now we have the enhancement of our conscience to such a degree that we can actually put out the flames of sin in our own mind and spirit before they ever actually come to fruition. That doesn't mean that we don't slip up and commit our fair amount of sin. I would just argue that although we cannot see it, the behavior and the life of a believer with the Spirit is so much more not only able, but overall, when somebody is properly following the Lord as best they can, it is overall far less full of sin than those prior. And even those prior were still saved if they trusted in God's answer to sin, the coming Messiah, the Son of David, Lion of the tribe of Judah, pick a name, root of Jesse, etc. So why is Antichrist going to be so on point with legalisms? And by the way, legalisms does not just mean, legalism in general, does not just mean following the old Mosaic law. It is literally any set of strictures that we venerate, for lack of a better way to put it, to the point of being almost in a like position as something like the Bible, right? The Bible and the Lord are supposed to be seen as one because one emanated from the other. The Bible is literally the words of God given to us to get through this life. The Ten Commandments were good for unbelievers. They were good for those living under the Mosaic law before the gift of the Spirit came. They are a hindrance at this point for us because, again, this is something that is stated over and over again in the New Testament, and I really hope those who are watching this who are pro, Ten Commandments in schools and all these other things that they're trying to do now, all of this is a precursor for a seemingly moral, very intelligent, answer-filled super leader to come on the scene and appeal to all types. It won't just be those who follow the law either. He will have a great acceptance for those who are libertine and complacent. I'm going to go over that in a different video. But in this case, we need to understand that our calling as spirit-driven believers is so much greater than anything any set of rules or laws can encompass. It's not very funny, really, honestly. It's quite sad, actually, that people want to reduce our simple behaviors down to just a series of laws. Again, like I've already stated, if we have any inkling of desiring something, adultery, theft, covetousness, murder, all the things that come from rage and malice and hatred and pride and arrogance, all of these things are the seeds of these sins. And once they've been committed in the mind, it says you might as well be guilty of having done it with your bare hands. This was the whole purpose of making everybody aware, from the outward position on in, if they're being honest. They weren't, of course. Most people just ignored that and didn't choose to believe in the Messiah. They chose to believe in their own ability to fulfill these laws outwardly, which is ridiculous. But it was supposed to shine a light on the inner man and just how incredibly lost without the work of Christ every single human being on this earth ever was and ever will be. When the Antichrist comes, he's going to make people feel so good in their pride that they have been able to put a lid on their own behaviors by not acting out the fullest expression of these sins. And it will be very much to his benefit if people are outwardly focused and not inwardly so, because of that extra enhanced view of our own conscience and our own self that the Spirit gives us. And again, people can see your outward motivations your inward motivations from your outward expression of behavior. There will be a certain level of extreme piety, perhaps, that comes along with the Antichrist. We don't know what it looks like just yet. But when we compare the Ten Commandments to most peoples ever, tribes, nations, whatever, law sets, they're actually very much alike, right? Like, love God with all your heart, love others as yourself. These things are seemingly simple. The problem is who is in the place of God, right? If Antichrist is touting a bunch of rules about these things and his father supposedly is the God he's talking about, he's saying, love Satan with all your heart. He's saying, treat other people the way Satan would want you to treat them. Perhaps his answer to covetousness will be that he'll just give gifts to everybody who trusts him, and there'll be a short-term period where everybody seems to be prospering because he's running around filling everyone's coffers or handing out, awards or whatever makes people feel good about themselves. It will be very much in his interest, just the same way it was Antiochus from Daniel 11's interest, to go around and flatter people as much as possible into thinking that his way of viewing things in the flesh is somehow able to supersede anything that God ever truly had for us with his own Spirit after the resurrection and ascension of his Son. This is why it is so dangerous. We have the ability to do more than the Ten Commandments with the Spirit at the helm. If we are sitting around telling the Spirit, hold on now, I got to read these lists and laws and focus with my flesh, we will absolutely we will miss that small, still voice that is telling us the right way to think and the right way to act as a result. So we will have full coverage if we decide to accept the Spirit's prodding. We will not have that if we think somehow we are capable of not sinning in our flesh. This is ridiculous. This is patently ridiculous. I'm going to end with this. Paul made it quite clear that amongst all of his peers, he was a Jew among Jews. He was, very, very highly admonished, highly awarded, rewarded, whatever, by his superiors for being able to essentially act out all the commandments. But when he realized that he could never stop coveting the seemingly most minimal of the commandments, he realized he was a lawbreaker through and through, because anybody guilty of breaking any of the commandments is a lawbreaker of all laws. So it was irrelevant, and he had to be honest when Christ came and truly humbled him, because I'm pretty sure that evil nagging in the back of his mind, reminding him that he was wrong before he was accepting Christ, was part of his impetus to be so evil. And I think that's really typical among humans. We have the tendency of taking our own self-righteousness and turning it into a prideful, hateful rage against those who don't race after our own self-righteous views and tendencies. And it's a really sick thing. But that's what we're seeing today. We're seeing everybody saying, if you don't follow the Ten Commandments, you're a lawbreaker. Well, if you don't have the Spirit, you don't even stand a chance to follow the Ten Commandments, let alone the myriad of other laws and rules and regulations that the law fully encompass, the total righteous nature of the perfection that Christ would bring, that we would never stand a chance to fulfill. I hope this made sense. I hope this was, for those who saw that last video, I apologize for the attitude. All of us, myself especially in this position, need to keep a level head, and I will do my best to not bring that same energy ever again. I appreciate you guys watching. Comment down below, let me know what you think. Legalists, I'm sure you're going to have some hate. Bring it on. Don't really care. I hope for you guys, I pray for you guys. We cannot let these paltry things of the past overtake our much, much improved situation now here on this earth, doing the Lord's will in His Spirit. His Spirit is supreme. Talk to you soon.